After an Imperial settlement on Clandathu was attacked by arachnids, the High Lords of Terror have taken the decision to mobilise the Astra Militarum regiment known as the Mobile Infantry to take revenge on the Xenos. The recruitment drive starts now. Join the fight and defend the Imperium against these Xenos enemies. Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm painting up this Imperial Guard model in the style of the Mobile Infantry from Starship Troopers to join the fight against the bugs.
Would you like to know more? Young people from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
They're doing their part. Are you? Join the Mobile Infantry and save the world. Service guarantees citizenship.
The first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, as this will give us a nice even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. Now the first thing I'm going to do is come in with some Dawnstone and I'm going to paint all of the fabric to the model. So this will be all the parts to his tunic and the trousers. I'm going to catch these with a couple of layers of Dawnstone to build up to a nice solid light grey colour all over that uniform. So the Mobile Infantry in the Starship Troopers movie have this grey uniform, two different shades of grey. So I'm going to paint the fabric with the lighter grey of Dawnstone. I'm going to paint all of the armour with a darker colour later. So just take your time, make sure you work your way around the model, picking out all of the fabric on this model with a couple of layers of Dawnstone. The first layer is going to give you slightly patchy coverage, but by keeping your layers nice and thin, coming back in with a second or third layer, you'll build up to a nice solid layer of Dawnstone all over that fabric. After a couple of layers of Dawnstone, we've built up to a nice solid light grey colour all over that uniform. So the next step, we're going to come in and paint all of the armour on the model. So for that I'm going to be using Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm going to catch his helmet and the body armour with a couple of layers of Mechanica Standard Grey to build up to a nice solid colour of grey. As you can see, this has a different shades to it than the Dawnstone we used on the uniform. So this will help differentiate these two areas between the fabric and the armour, helping make both of them stand out, while still giving that unified grey look all across the uniform. Once again, this might give you slightly patchy coverage after the first layer. Just come in with a second layer of Mechanica Standard Grey, build up to a nice solid base coat all over that armour. Obviously try and be nice and neat when we're around areas of the fabric. You don't want to get any of the Mechanica Standard Grey over the Dawnstone we've already painted. And after a couple of layers of Mechanica Standard Grey, you see we've built up to a nice solid base coat all over the armour to the model. So the next step will be to paint any skin on the model, and for that I'm coming in with some Bugman's Glow. I'm just going to apply this to the areas of skin for his face and his hands. Obviously be nice and neat around any areas of grey. Keep your paint nice and thin so we don't obscure any detail. Just make sure you pick out his face and his hands with a couple of layers of Bugman's Glow. Once you're catching the hands here on his las gun, got these bits here poking out from the front. And don't forget to catch the bit of hand at the back of the las gun with a couple of layers of Bugman's Glow as well. And after a couple of layers of Bugman's Glow, got a really solid layer all over his skin. So now the next step will be to pick out any black details on the model, and for that I'll be coming in with some Corvus black. I'm going to paint anything we want to be black. So it's going to be his belt here, coming down his back and around his waist. Obviously being nice and careful around those areas of Dawnstone. Also going to catch his boots as well, finishing all of these with a layer of Corvus black. And finally, I'm going to catch all of his las gun with some Corvus black as well. Make sure I catch all of the body and the butt of the rifle as well. Make sure you catch all of this with some Corvus black. And with that Corvus black applied, there's only a couple of base coats left to apply to this model. So now with some Celestia Grey, I'm going to come in and pick out the Aquillas on the model. So he's got one here on his helmet, one on his armour, and there's one on his las gun as well. Make sure you catch these with a couple of layers of Celestia Grey, being nice and neat around all the other colours we've already painted. But if you're going for a true Starship Troopers look, you can remove these Aquillas off the model, but I've left them on just to keep that 40k look to the miniature. And with the Aquillas picked out, the only thing left to do now is to paint the metallic details on the model. And for that I'll be using Lead Belcher. I'm just going to pick out a few metallic details on his las gun. So it'll be the muzzle here, as well as any fittings that are on the model. So there's the magazine here at the bottom, as well as a few little details. I'm going to pick these out with some Lead Belcher. And with that Lead Belcher applied, that's all the base coats applied to this model. So now it's time to start shading the miniature.
Would you like to know more?
Fully automatic burrito. Who wants to hold it?
Citizen rule. People making a better tomorrow.
First one, come in with Whiteland Flesh Shade. I'm going to shade this all over the face and the hands to the miniature. Just catch all of the skin with a shade of Whiteland Flesh Shade. Being nice and careful around all the other colours we've painted. And with some Nuln Oil, I'm going to shade the rest of the model. So for areas of fabric and black, I'm going to paint the Nuln Oil all over, making sure it doesn't pull too heavily into any of the recesses, but just cover all of these areas, like the fabric and the boots, with a shade of Nuln Oil. Just going to make sure I catch all of the gun casing and the metallics with some Nuln Oil as well. I'm going to catch the Aquillas with some Nuln Oil too. And now for the armour, I'm going to come in and recess shade with the Nuln Oil. So for this, just paint a thin line of Nuln Oil around any of the details and in any of the recesses of that armour. Just make sure you catch these with a thin pin shade of known oil, but leaving the rest of the armour at its brighter colour. On the helmet there's quite a few little details, just make sure you catch all of these with a pin shade of known oil.
Would you like to know more?
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below.
Everyone's doing their part. Are you? The war effort needs your effort. At work, at home, in your community.
So as you can see, after the shades have dried, it's really added definition all over the miniature. Now the first thing I'm going to do is start highlighting the model. Now the first step for highlighting the model is I'm coming in with some Bugman's Glow. I'm going to paint this over all the raised details of skin. So wherever that Reichland flesh shade settled in the recesses, I'm leaving that and coming in on either side of it with a thin layer of Bugman's Glow to bring it back up to its original colour. Obviously we're doing some quite small areas here, so just be nice and careful and just catch all of those raised details with a thin layer of Bugman's Glow. And with that Bugman's Glow applied, you can see it's brought those areas back up to their original colour. And now with a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone, I'm going to come in and place this in those areas we just applied the Bugman's Glow, but focusing onto the more raised parts of all of these details. So leave a little bit of Bugman's Glow showing through on either side, and come in with a little bit of this mix, just brighten that skin up on all the most raised details. And with that mix applied, it's brightened up those areas of the skin a little bit more as we work towards our brightest highlights. So now with some pure Cadian Flesh Tone, I'm going to come in and once again place this in the areas we just applied that mix, but really focusing onto those most raised areas now where the light would catch the most. So it's things here like his cheeks and his lips, the knuckles to his hands as well. I'm just putting a little bit Cadian Flesh Tone onto these most raised areas, bringing them up to a brighter highlight. And with the pure Cadian Flesh Tone applied, the skin's almost highlighted. There's just one more layer to come in with and really accentuate some of those details. So for that, with some Kislev flesh, I'm just going to come in and pick out just the sharpest points. So it's things like the tip of his nose here, the bottom lip, and the knuckles on his hands and his fingertips. I'm just catching these with a small spot Kislev flesh, just to make them really stand out. And with that Kislev flesh applied, that is the skin highlighted on the model. For the next step, I'm going to come in and paint the eyes just to finish off the face. So for the eyes, I'm coming in with some Abaddon Black first. I'm going to sink this into the recesses of his eye sockets, obviously being really careful around the skin we've just painted. And then with a little bit of white scar, I'm just coming in, I'm going to apply a thin line within the black we just applied. And finally with some Abaddon black again. Just going to add a small line in the middle of the white that will act like a pupil. And with those eyes painted, that is the face and the skin highlighted on the model. So the next step, we're going to start highlighting the fabric. And for that I'm coming in with Dawnstone again first. And much like with the skin, I'm placing this in all the areas that the shade didn't settle. So wherever there's some Nuln Oil in a recess, I'm coming on either side of that with the Dawnstone and bringing those areas back up to colour. So just take your time at this step, as the fabric is so much of the model and so much interest all over it. Just work your way around the model, picking out all of these raised areas of the fabric with a thin layer of Dawnstone, but leaving that Nuln Oil showing in all of the recesses. On areas here like the trousers, there's lots of folds and crevices, so make sure you catch all of these with the Dawnstone, but leave that shade in all the recesses all over the trousers. Also here on the arms, there's lots of creases on the fabric on his arms, so just make sure you catch all of those raised areas with a layer of Dawnstone. And with that Dawnstone applied, you can see it's really brightened up those areas of fabric and give us a nice base to work from as we build our way up towards our highlights. So now with a 50-50 mix of Dawnstone and Administratum Grey, I'm going to come in and place some of this in the middle of all the areas that we just applied the Dawnstone. So leave some of the Dawnstone showing on either side, and come in with some of this mix, placing it in the centre of all of those areas that we just applied Dawnstone, focusing it towards the most raised areas of any creases. This will really help build up that transition to our lighter colours for our highlights. Just take your time at this step, work your way around the model, and apply a little bit of this mix in the middle of all the areas that we just applied the Dawnstone. And with that mix applied, you can see it's brightened up some of those areas, really added definition and volume all over that fabric. Now there's just one final highlight to apply to that fabric. That'll be with some pure Administratum Grey. Going to come in and do like an edge highlight on all the most raised and sharpest details on the fabric. So the tops of some of these creases and folds here, the edge of the tunic here around his waist, just coming in and picking out these most raised spots, applying a thin edge highlight of Administratum Grey. Now the reason I've decided to paint this guy up as a member of the Mobile Infantry from Starship Troopers is because the two universes have an awful lot in common. Now I love the Starship Troopers film. It's an absolutely fantastic parody of a crazy, extreme government of the future, which is so much like Warhammer 40,000. The two have clearly influenced each other throughout the years. With the original book, by Heinlein, clearly influencing the origins of Warhammer 40K. And now, I think in the 90s, 40K influenced the film of Starship Troopers ever so slightly. I love both franchises, they've got a lot in common, and they're both great parodies of their universe, so I thought it'd be a bit of fun to paint up an Imperial Guard model in the style of the Mobile Infantry. And with that highlight of Administratum Grey applied to the uniform, you can see it's really brightened up those areas and added interest all over that fabric. So now with some Dawnstone again, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do an edge highlight all over the armour. Keep these lines nice and thin and just pick out the edges to all of the armour with a thin layer of Dawnstone. This will give the impression of the light catching all the sharpest details, really just make that armour stand out. Just take your time at this step, work your way around all of the armour, picking out the edge of every panel with a thin edge highlight of Dawnstone, just to help make all of those armour panels really pop. And with that Dawnstone applied, you can see it's really made the armour stand out. Now there's just a couple of areas left to highlight on the model. So now with some Eshin Grey, I'm going to come in and highlight the boots and the belt to the model. I'm coming in doing like a chunky highlight around the belt, catching both the edges, the top and the bottom, with a highlight of Eshin Grey. And on the boots as well, I'm picking out any raised details, so it's these areas here around the top, and any folds or creases on the boots as well. I'm catching these with a chunky highlight of Eshin Grey. With that highlight of Eshin Grey applied, there's one more highlight to apply to these black areas, and that's some Mechanicus Standard Grey, which you're coming in and applying as a thin edge highlight within that Eshin Grey we just applied. I put this on all the very edges of his boots and his belt to really make these areas pop and stand out. By keeping that Eshin Grey as a chunky highlight, it's allowed us to come in and apply this much thinner edge highlight within that Eshin Grey, and you give us a nice two-tone highlight to all of these areas of black. Just keep these lines nice and neat and just catch all of the areas that just apply the chunky highlight of Eshin Grey with a thin line of Mechanicus Standard Grey. And with that Mechanicus Standard Grey applied, that is his boot and his belt highlighted. So the next thing we're going to do is highlight the black for his gun casing. So for this I'm coming in with Mechanicus Standard Grey again. Now I'm applying a chunky highlight all the way around the edge of the casing on his gun. To be nice and neat with these lines, don't want to get these over anything that isn't the edge of the gun casing, but just apply a chunky edge highlight of Mechanicus Standard Grey all the way around the casing to his last gun. And with that chunky edge highlight applied to his las gun, now we can come in with some Administratum Grey and apply a thin edge highlight within that Mechanica standard grey. So much like with the boots, keep this nice and thin, focus it onto the very edges of all of the areas, and just apply a thin edge highlight of Administratum grey within the Mechanica standard grey. Remember to let a little bit of the Mechanica standard grey show through, so we've got that two-tone highlight all over the casing to his gun. Again, just take your time at this step, make sure you highlight all of that casing with a thin edge highlight of Administratum grey. And with the gun highlighted, that's really made that gun casing stand out. So the next thing to highlight will be the Aquillas. And for this, I'm coming in with some white scar. I'm just going to apply a thin edge highlight on any of the raised details to the Aquila. So any of the feathers, the skull, any of these details, I'm just picking these out with a thin edge highlight of white scar. Obviously being nice and neat around all the other colours we've painted. Just pick out all of these Aquillas with a thin edge highlight of white scar. And with the Aquillas highlighted, there's just one last detail left to highlight on the model, and that will be all the metallics on his lasgun. So for that, I'm coming in with some Storm Hose Silver. I'm just going to apply a thin edge highlight to all of the metallics on the lasgun, just catching all of these details with a thin highlight of Storm Hose Silver.
Would you like to know more?
Come on, you apes! You wanna live forever!
We need you all. Service guarantees citizenship.
So with that metallic details highlighted, that is how to paint an Astra Militarum Trooper in the style of the Mobile Infantry from Starship Troopers. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below, are there any other film franchises you would like to see me paint a model in the style of? Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and happy painting!